What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and last week we got the season 2 finale of the Halo series, and based on the fact that I really didn't like the first season, that's a bit of an understatement, but we'll get to that here in a second. I wasn't sure if I wanted to review the second season, so I actually decided to let fate decide. I'm going to actually flip a coin. It's a pretty good flip if I do say so myself. It is heads, so without further ado, let's rock. All jokes aside, not only was I not sure I was going to review the second season, I wasn't even sure I was going to watch the second season. The first season of Halo was an unmitigated disaster for fans like myself of the games. And anybody new to this channel, you may be wondering, well, did you review the first season? Because I don't see that video on your channel. And it's funny that you ask, person I just made up for this example. I did, in fact, review the first season of Halo for this channel. The reason you can't find that video anywhere is because apparently Paramount Plus does not like when you give your honest opinion on their shit show, and they copyright struck that video and made me take it down. And since you can't watch that video anymore, I'm going to give you a quick recap of my thoughts of the first season. And it's not just because I'm bitter that they made me take the video down. It does actually color how I feel about the second season in comparison. So, video game adaptations have a long history, whether they're films or TV shows, of just not really working. And in my opinion, I think it's because Hollywood doesn't really understand what makes gamers tick, why we enjoy the games that we enjoy. They just see an established IP that has an established fan base, and they think they can just put out whatever, and us gamers will just watch it because we like those games. They don't actually take the time to understand why we like the games that we like. But surprisingly, that wasn't the case with the first season of Halo. The showrunners felt like they knew what we wanted. They just didn't give it to us. The first season of Halo felt like it was made by showrunners that understood the game, but they just thought that they could do better, which was so annoying. That's why I hated it so much, was because they could have given us what we wanted. They just had no desire to do so. And that was a big reason why I didn't even think I would watch the second season. It wasn't until I found out that they had actually changed the showrunner after the first season that I even considered giving it a shot. I was holding out hope that they had learned their lesson and would course correct after that god-awful first season. And while the second season is far from perfect, and we'll get into why I say that here in a little bit, I did see the effort to make Halo the show what it should have been from the beginning. And one way they did that in the second season was to really ramp up the action. The reason the Halo game series has been so popular for so long is that at its core, it's a badass first-person shooter. That's what made me fall in love with it from the first game, and I've loved it ever since. And I definitely appreciated that they made an effort to make the action in the second season feel much like a first-person shooter. They would often show you the perspective of the character that you're following in the middle of battle, like you would get in a first-person shooter. They would also do this really cool thing where they would give you this intense close-up of that person inside the armor, and that would really ramp up the tension of those scenes for me. And honestly, I haven't rewatched the first season, probably never will. There were some cool moments, to give the first season a little bit of credit. There were some cool action moments. Unfortunately, those moments were few and far between. I think just in the 4th episode alone of season 2, there were more of those moments than in the entirety of the first season alone. And it should come as no surprise that my favorite episode of season 2 was the 4th episode, which is basically this show's version of the Fall of Reach. There were so many cool moments from this episode, but I especially want to point out how I loved them blowing up a Wraith, which was some of my favorite moments from the game series, and they really pulled it off in this episode. And the fight at the end of the episode with the Jackals, despite the shaky CGI, was awesome as well. Luckily, that wasn't the only episode with excellent action. The season finale was chock full of it as well. We finally got to see the Spartan 3s in action during the finale, and it did not disappoint. I thought the design of their armor looked badass. Speaking of armor, unfortunately, if you were upset at how much the Master Chief took off his helmet in the first season, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You're gonna hate how little he is in his armor in season 2 as well. He is in his armor most of the first 3 episodes. However, after that, it gets taken away from him, and he doesn't get it back until about a quarter of the way through the last episode. So basically, half of the season, he does not have his armor. However, the moment he puts his helmet back on and that score hits, it was hyped. I was so excited. Unfortunately, that excitement was immediately undercut by the fact that they chose to cut from that straight to a boring conversation between McKay and Cortana. More on their relationship here in a little bit. And I felt like that really killed the momentum of that moment. However, it did pay off in the following scene. Literally the very next scene after that boring conversation I just mentioned, there's this badass reunion between Master Chief and Kai. But I felt like that conversation could have happened at any point in the finale. I just don't understand why they decided to kill that momentum. It just felt very strange to me that they kneecapped that moment for some meaningless exposition. And it wasn't just the Spartan 3s that got to have all the fun in the season finale. There was also a Master Chief versus the Arbiter showdown. It was essentially McKee's current boyfriend fighting her ex while she watched. There was also a really cool cliffhanger at the end of the season finale that got me really excited for the potential of a season 3, which is a hell of a turnaround for this show that I wasn't even sure I was gonna even watch the second season because I hated the first season so much, and now I'm actually hyped for a potential third season. And I really only have 2 major issues with the action in season 2, and both, if you want to be charitable, can be chalked up to budgetary issues. This is a sci-fi series after all, and those historically have had bigger budgets because of the visual effects required to make them. And in my opinion, Halo is on the worst streaming service, Paramount Plus, so I would assume it didn't have the big budget of a Netflix or HBO Max show. So you could argue that it's not entirely their fault, but there were still 2 issues with the action. The first being that there was at least 3 scenes I can think of off the top of my head that were either too foggy or too dark to really see what was going on. It was especially bad in the first episode where Chief has to save a group of Marines. It was just too damn foggy to know what was really happening. And there seems to be this technique in TV and film of making action scenes, especially ones with a lot of visual effects, too dark just to save money. If you can't see what's happening as well, they don't have to spend the money to render it. My second issue with the action was the depiction of the Flood in this season. To their credit, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I didn't watch the season finale until Friday afternoon, and by that time, the internet was already doing internet things. There was already videos and articles discussing how the show did the Flood dirty. So I was kind of preparing myself for the worst, and at first, I actually thought that they did a pretty good job with the Flood. When you first see it, there's a small scene where these characters are trapped in jail with somebody that's infected. That infected person gets bloated and grows a tentacle of sorts. It basically looks exactly what I thought a live action adaptation of the Flood would look like. Unfortunately, later on in the episode, there's a scene where they have to show that on a larger scale. And they basically, I'm assuming to save money, they basically made him look like rabid zombies, which really bummed me out because more so than the Covenant, the Flood is the real threat in the games. And to reduce the Flood and that threat to just basically cut and paste zombies from other movies and TV really disappointed me. Again, I think that they did both of these things to save money, but it still bummed me out a lot. But overall, I really enjoyed the action. It was easily the best part of the season, and honestly, it's the best part of the show so far. Now, unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the story in season 2, but I honestly don't want to shit on it too much because it's way better than the first season story, which I know isn't setting the bar super high, but it is still better. And they were at such a huge disadvantage because the first season set them up so poorly that they had to spend a lot of the second season story kind of course correcting some of the stupid stuff that they set up in season 1. Of course, I, like most people, absolutely hated McKee and Master Chief's relationship, and season 2 thankfully kept them as far away from each other as possible. Honestly, they don't really share the screen much at all until really the season finale, and even then it's not too much. So I definitely, on one hand, appreciated that, but on the other, it really sucked because they happened to give Cortana to McKee and not Master Chief. And that sucked because Chief's relationship with Cortana is obviously the heartbeat of the game series. So for them to give Cortana to my least favorite character from season 1 really pissed me off. But I will definitely make that trade every day of the week if it means that Chief and McKee aren't gonna bone again. So there's that. I was also not a huge fan of Quan in the first season, and I liked that she played a less important role in the second season, at least the first part of the second season. She essentially, the first few episodes, just kind of fucks off with Soren, which is another character that I didn't really like in the first season, which shouldn't come as a surprise because I didn't really like much from the first season. So I liked that they kind of stashed those two characters away in a storyline that I didn't really have to pay attention to because I didn't really like those characters. However, Quan's storyline becomes much more important as the season progresses, and I think that her, I guess without spoiling anything, her ability to interact with the Flood is the best way to say it without spoiling anything. I think it's going to set up a really interesting storyline in season 3. So it's at least a step in the right direction with her. And this season did a way better job of exploring the Spartans as human beings, especially Riz. This season did a great job of kind of showing her vulnerable side, as vulnerable as a Spartan can be. She really gets her ass kicked a lot in this season, and it really shines a light on the toll that it's having on her body, and the idea of her trying to hang on as a Spartan, but her body not cooperating was really interesting to me. And it really explores the idea of what it means to be a Spartan when you can't actually suit up and be a Spartan. And that sort of storyline really was intriguing to me. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Natasha Kolzak's performance as Riz was great. Honestly, even though I didn't love some of the plot elements in the second season, the performances were great. They were easily the second best part of the season for me, and that's second to only the action, which I've already talked about. Even though Quan isn't my favorite character, Hee-Rin Ha does a good job. So if her role is becoming bigger in the third season and beyond, I would welcome it. She's a great actress. And while I know it's the cool thing to shit on Pablo Schreiber's portrayal of Master Chief in the first season, and while I do agree it's not great, I do think that people are unfairly criticizing him because I think that people are making the easy mistake of confusing the material, which isn't good in the first season, with his performance of the character, which again is easy to do, but I don't think it's necessarily fair. Master Chief is a very tough character to nail down, especially in a TV show where you're asked to be the star, because he's a character that's not supposed to talk all that much. He's not supposed to emote that much. So he has to really do a lot with very little to work with. And so I think that he does an okay job. It's probably not his best performance. I think he was way better earlier in his career in The Wire. He plays kind of a side character, I think in season 2 or maybe season 3. And I thought he was really good in that show. So he definitely has the chops to do it. And I think that he's given better material in season 2 versus season 1. It's not his best performance, but I don't think it deserves to get shit on like it's been. And while I'm talking about performances, I do want to point out Danny Sapini's, which I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. His performance as Keys was awesome. His rousing speech to the Marines in the Reach episode literally gave me chills. He was so good in the little bit that he gets to be in this show. I also wanted to highlight Joseph Morgan's performance as Ackerson in the second season of Halo. He really throws his weight around early and often in this season. He immediately caught my attention when Ackerson essentially torpedoes a meeting with the Spartans. Later on, you get this more tragic backstory with him and his sister. You also get a scene with him and his dad who has dementia right before the fall of Reach that was touching. So I really enjoyed his character. Unfortunately, much like Andy did with Woody, the writers of Halo just decided they didn't want to play with this character anymore, and you don't really see him much in the second half of the season. Now, his character does have a bit of a redemption arc in the season finale, but I wish that they just used him a little bit more because I really liked his performance. Now, overall, I didn't love the second season of Halo. It's definitely a step in the right direction compared to that awful first season. The action, despite some of the shaky CGI and lighting issues, is what you would expect from a Halo series. It was action-packed and I loved it. The cast was great, even though some of them didn't get the material their performances deserved. And based on the cliffhanger, I'm really excited to see where this story goes from here. The biggest change for me personally between the first and second season was just how I felt about each episode. Watching the first season felt like homework. Every episode felt like a chore versus the second season where I started to actually look forward to each episode. Now, not every episode of the second season was a banger by any means, but the worst episode of season 2 was far and away better than the best episode of season 1. So I'm really looking forward to season 3. I'm going to give the second season of the Halo series 3.5 stars. But as always, those are just my thoughts on the second season of the Halo series. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. Of course, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, as the kids say. If you did enjoy the video, which you obviously did or you wouldn't still be watching, please consider subscribing and dinging that bell. That way you get notified every time I post another video. I try to post weekly gaming related content, so if you like that type of content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy, and we were just talking and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?